What's up, everybody? Axe Wizard here, back with another devlog on my 2D top-down space RPG that I haven't worked on in over a year. The the devlog series that I so boldly named "I Make a Game Start to Finish." Just because I stopped working on it doesn't mean that it's not. You know, I abandoned it. Just stuff happened, right? So, in case you're wondering when the last one was, it was actually November 27th, 2023. As of this recording, it's February 2nd, 2025. So, that's 15 months ago that I recorded my last devlog on this. Now, I did do a stream somewhat recently where I was kind of just reacquainting myself with the code, and I saw a lot of glaring things that I could not easily, but I should fix. So the ship being one of them, the fact that my ship script is almost 1,400 lines of code it's a bit alarming. And that's after I'd already refactored some of it out. I think it was over 2,000 before I did that. So yeah, anyway. So what are we working on today? I figured I would just jump into something easy, but I think I did a few miscellaneous things since my last devlog. So I don't know how relevant any of this stuff is. I added a back button to the shipyard window. Okay, cool. I updated ships.gd to have all the correct tags. So I was implementing a tag system. I refactored the ship class to use tags and not a ship class variable. So I think I remember doing that. Made it so ships are disabled rather than dying. So this is something I was kind of working on, and you'll see it here when I play the game in a second. And then I added floating combat text because I wanted to. So let's look at the floating combat text. So when I start the game and I load my game, I've got the fastest ship I can get because I wanted to fly around this battlefield. So as we're going around this battlefield, looks like a battle's going to start down here. If you look at our mini map, you can see. Okay, here we go. So I got floating combat text, right? So you saw damage numbers kind of appearing and floating. It's not great. It could definitely use some work still, but it also works for beam weapons. So you see how the damage just keeps compiling here? It doesn't, you probably can't see it too well, but let me zoom in if I can get over here. There's just a stream of numbers. So there's so much chaos happening, which is why I kind of wanted to get back into making this game, because it was like, I did a lot on it actually. Pretty cool. We got ship AI kind of working. I was actually kind of impressed with the targeting system because I forgot that turrets and stuff will try to compensate for your current velocity. So they're really accurate. And some of these big ships, like this bad boy right here that's got this big heavy cannon on it, like right here, that guy right there, that big ass heavy cannon, that fucker hurts. That hurts big time. Lots of damage. Okay, and it's accurate. So when I was trying to run away, I kept having to like change my velocity, like literally bob and weave to get away from it. Super cool. Anyway, I just had a bunch of pizza pockets before recording this. Let me crack open a root beer, because why not? Ah, life is good. All right, so anyway, as this chaos is unfolding, you can see Synthocracy has pretty much taken over this airspace. Coalition is pretty much getting just deleted. Look at all these drones. So this is fun. But yeah, so floating combat text, just like the damage numbers. I'm not happy with how it is currently. Like, because when you fight somebody, or like when you're doing a bunch of damage, especially if you're fighting like a ship cruiser or something like that just has a ton of different weapons, it's kind of hard to tell exactly how much damage you're doing. And I think one easy way... God, the ship is so fast. Jesus. All right, let me go pick a fight with a ship in this system here real quick so we can get a nice isolated incident of some damage numbers. So here's a frigate. What up, punk? You want a piece of me? Come get it. Come get it. You want a piece of me? So watch all these damage numbers, right? Like, what does all this even mean? And here, watch this this targeting. See the turrets targeting? It still hits me even though I'm like bobbing and weaving and strafing around. Look at those turrets, man. It's awesome. Anyway, so the damage numbers, it's kind of hard to get an accurate depiction of like what's happening. Not to mention the fact that they look pretty lackluster anyway. But I just did a test thing with how I got this rigged up, and we'll do a code review here after I finish this little demo for those interested. So now, if I pick a fight with... Well, that guy's going to be kind of lame. Little drone, just flies around. So there should be... What kind of ship is over here? I'm going to turn around so I can slow down. Here we go. Pick a fight with him. So you can see now, the damage numbers just kind of stack up with 1. And they're kind of like odd. They just kind of float out and they just kind of hang there. Oh my god, there's so many drones. Get out of here. No. No. Go away. Bastards. So, it's kind of cool. Like, I think this is much more readable. So the damage numbers in blue means that it was absorbed by a shield. Once I start to... Oh my god, I'm still taking damage. So that damage number should have updated, but it didn't. It should have updated to yellow once I was taking integrity damage, which you can see I took a lot of. So now my shields are recharging, and I'm just running for my life. But I had the fastest ship in the game, so nobody can catch me, so it's all good. But I think that that is much better. So let's jump down to that combat test system, and we'll see how we do. If I don't die before I can warp out of here. Here we go. All right. There's my little cheesy warp animation. So, okay, let's see how let's get some combat going here. So ships respawning in. There's a little fighter here. We'll see where he runs off to once a target is acquired. Here we go. He's away. An enemy ship has warped in. We are in pursuit. Okay, oh my god. This is so fast. Okay, so you see the number here, like there's not much numbers flying around, and it's kind of constantly updating as it's doing more damage, especially for the beam weapons. That's very important. So you can see this guy's taking a metric shit ton of damage. He's not having a good time. I'm gonna jump in on this free-for-all here. I'm gonna try to shoot him. You're going down. He's probably gonna, I think he's gonna get away though. Nope, not today. I think he's disabled now. So you see how he was at like 0% health and shields, but he was still taking damage. That was another change I did, is that it's not fully done yet, but I wanted to be able to add the ability to like disable and potentially loot or even take over ships, which I think would be awesome. So I started that process. All I did was just add a few lines of code that just says, hey, if you're below your like 0, don't actually die. Just die when you're below like half of your hit points again, right? It's kind of bad code, but and then of course I didn't adjust the AI to accommodate the fact that, you know, he's already dead. Right? So they still just go for the kill until it's absolutely obliterated. But I think this floating combat text looks a little better. There's still some stylistic things I can do. For example, like I can make it like flash or get bigger when it's being updated. But when you're getting hit with like a beam weapon, that can be pretty jarring, I think. And yeah, so we'll see. I'm gonna play with that more, but this was just like an easy kind of thing just to get back into the game. And because I haven't looked at the code in like over a year, and I am so glad that I commented my code, because if I didn't, I would have had no idea what the hell I was thinking when I wrote most of this stuff. Because now that I come at it with fresh eyes, I see like so many things I could have done better. And honestly, if you were watching my live stream I did, where I was like reacquainting myself with the code, I was like 50-50 on just rewriting the entire damn thing again, except this time writing it in Godot 4. Because right now I'm using Godot 3.6 because of how I handled the glow stuff. Like all, like you see like the lasers and stuff firing and like the little thrusters and stuff when they go and all that stuff, especially when I get closer to the star, which I think is down here. Let's boost over here. Yeah, right here. There's a star. So when I get closer to the star, oh my god, this thing is so fast. Okay, see how the boosters and stuff really glow, and there's like a glow around the bullets and stuff like that, or the rounds. Like a lot of that is due to the lighting, which they changed how that works for 2D games in Godot 4. And when I tried to port this over, I think I made a devlog about it. It didn't go so well because this looks way different in Godot 4. And I think that if I had just redesigned this from scratch, it would have looked a lot better anyway. Like even a lot of these little particles that I have going on aren't great. I could probably make those a lot better anyway. But I decided to keep with what I got because I've already put all this work into it, and I'm tired of refactoring code for no additional benefits. Like, I mean, no new features. I'm getting to the point now where as I'm working on this game, I'm spending more time playing it than I am working on it, which is a good sign, but it's also a bad sign for development because now I find myself to where I don't really want to work on it. I just want to play the damn thing, and I kind of get frustrated when it's like it's not how I want it to be yet. So there's a few big things I have left to tackle, and then a lot of it is just little cleanup, and then I can probably have a functioning game that I could even ship on Steam or something for like a few bucks or even $1 or something like that if I wanted to, which would be awesome. But yeah, anyway, that's the state of the game right now. It's been 15 months since I last had a devlog, so let's jump in and see what I did. All right, so looking at my little scratch things done since last episode in my main .gd here that I keep, I added a back button to the shipyard window. I don't even remember doing that. Well, let's see how that looks. I am flying through space. Let's just warp over to the Genesis system, and we will go, excuse me, check out the shipyard there. If I can even slow this pig down, because this thing is stupid fast. Like as soon as I get into a system, I gotta put on the brakes or else I'm flying out of control. It is nuts. Okay, slow down and land. Okay, so shipyard, is it talking about this button here? Or is it talking about this button? So you can't really see because like I'm in the way. Let me see if I can get out of the way here. Nope, wrong way. We gotta go the other way. The other way. There you go. There's like a cancel button down here. You can't really see because my green screen, like the edge of my green screen is down here. But whatever. So there's a cancel button. I don't know if that's what I added or if it was literally just this right here. I think it was just this. It might have been I had this down here before, but I don't know. So I guess I added that. I don't remember doing that. It must have not been a huge change. It's probably pretty easy. Those shipyard windows and stuff like that, I already am probably going to redo all the UI because I was learning UI as I did it, and I learned a few more things. But the problem is that all the things I've learned about UI are in Godot 4. There's a lot of translatable knowledge, but it's going to take some time. So I updated ships to have all the correct tags. So ships.gd is basically this really should just be a JSON list right here. So this is a dictionary that has every ship that I currently have in my game. It's got the name, which is kind of a redundant thing, but it's kind of hard to reference the key when you're, sometimes it's just easier to reference what you're trying to do inside the object itself when you're iterating through it like in a loop or something. So that's why I have this duplicated, so I can easily reference it inside the object without having to like see where I'm grabbing things. I have the description of what the ship is that appears in the shipyard. I have the scene path, which is basically, right now every ship has its own scene. They all share the same code with my ship class, but every ship is its own scene, which is another thing I have ideas for. I want to make a ship builder, so you can basically build your own ship, and I figure I could use that to actually build the ships. And one thing I do want to do long term is I want to move all this stuff just into JSON, because JSON, for those who don't know, is JavaScript object notation. It's an interchange format, and so it makes it so you can open up just the JSON file in whatever other program you want, whether it's like Notepad or Notepad++, and you can make changes as needed. So it might make it better to mod later on, but also, you know, I can store it in a file wherever I want. So I can just have all this here, and I can make a ship editor that just populates a bunch of the stuff about the ship. I could, in theory, do like everything. I could make a window that allows me to completely build the ships. Like I can upload a sprite, or I can upload an image that I want to use it as a sprite, and I can like position it where I want, and then I can add thrusters and stuff and weapon slots and all that stuff. That's what I want to do with it long term. I think that'd be really fun. So, and then here are the tags. So I don't know if I really covered it in a devlog or not, because it's been so long I don't remember, but I started implementing a tag system to where it's not really a system, it's just a bunch of tags. And the whole thing is that there's like a tag for basically everything. I got this idea while I was looking through a Pathfinder, the Pathfinder 2nd edition player manual or whatever. And I noticed that like everything in there had like a different tag on it. And some tags applied to different things. So it's like there might be a tag on a weapon, and there also might be a tag on a spell, or there might be a tag on a piece of armor. And so I was like, I wonder if I could do that. And the whole concept of this tags system that I basically robbed from Pathfinder is I made a bunch of tags. And hey, look, I have a comment that already explains this. This is why we comment our code, because this is what I was thinking at the time when I wrote this. Here we declare a list of tags. Tags can be applied to anything and everything, and it will allow us to specify behavior or interactions based on tags. For example, a ship that has the electrical tag may be susceptible to an attack from a weapon with the EMP tag. Normally, for something like, and then I have a little note here about how I chose to do this. So normally for something like this, you might think to use enums or enumerations or enumerators, whatever they're called. But doing that, so if you declare enums, typically like it just makes them integers. And so whatever you declare them as, it just starts at 0 and then it just increments from there. But if I ever wanted to reorganize my enums, it would break existing data. So for example, if I have a list of stuff, you know, going from 0 up to however many there are, and let's say like alien here, this would be position 2, because you got 0, 1, 2. If I wanted to organize it alphabetically for readability, and I added something else in the middle, in between acid and alien, this would now make it 3, because 0, 1, 2 would be the new one, and then 3 would now be alien. If I have a save file that's referencing like what tags and stuff you have, that'll just break everything. So what I elected to do instead is to use constants and just have them strings. And so that way I can organize them however I want. And when I save a game, I don't have to worry about breaking it if I add additional tags. If I redefine one of these things here, it's gonna break that save, and so I would have to add code to basically, it's kind of like shim code, to where you basically account for that change. So whenever you're loading that file, you specifically check for that thing that you changed, and then you would just update that. You would just handle it, which can get quickly messy if you do a lot of those. So I didn't want to do that. So I was trying to dodge that bullet. So I just made everything a constant. I just made it a string, and I'm organizing them alphabetically so you can quickly see, because there's probably going to be much more tags in here. But I've got tags for all sorts of stuff that aren't even implemented yet. So different types of damage. So there's like fire damage, effective against biological maybe. There's acid, which can be resisted by shields, but effective against hull and also biological, maybe. Yeah, so alien denotes that something is not human. Beam fires a beam rather than a projectile. So all of these different tags, they don't explicitly do anything themselves, but when I'm programming various behaviors and interactions, I can leverage tags to determine how things work. So for example, if a weapon fires a projectile versus a beam, if you fire a projectile, you just create it, you fire it, it goes, done. If you fire a beam, it's there the entire time and it has to keep doing stuff. So I have to handle that logic differently, and I can account for that easily with tags. And I could do it with variables, but tags makes just one central expected place where I can put all that stuff. So that's why that's there. So I refactored ships to use tags. So I used to have, let me see if I still have it somewhere. Ship class. Here we go. So there was a variable that I had that was called ship class, which I was using to determine what type of ship it is, whether it's a fighter, a freighter, a cruiser, or a carrier. So fighters are small ships that like that go for everything. Freighters don't really want to fight. They carry lots of cargo. They're typically slow, and they want to escape combat. Cruisers typically they're like big warships, like frigates and stuff like that. So they're typically not concerned with chasing down fighters. They're concerned with chasing down other cruisers and even carriers, and also maybe freighters. But they're not going to pursue a fighter because there's no way that they can catch up. And then carriers, likewise, are not going to pursue fighters or freighters because they're going to outrun them, or freighters will typically run anyway. They're not usually combatants, but carriers prefer to fight cruisers and other carriers, but they deploy fighters, right? So all these different behaviors I have to program. And I leverage that with tags. Before, I had a variable called ship class, and I was having to like reference it with other stuff like, oh, what kind of ship is the other thing? Well, now I can just reference the tags and see if it has the tag for fighter or freighter, cruiser or carrier, whatever. So I refactored that in several places. So if we just do a quick search for, I don't know, tags, we'll just do tags. So it's 51 matches, right? We got lots of different places we're calling it. So we're checking, hey, it does area.owner, so it's the owner of the area that we're colliding with. Does that ship have a value called tags, like a variable? If it does, hey, is this thing, does it have a tags ship that we know that we're colliding with a ship? So we can do that logic, right? So you can see kind of how I'm using those tags throughout the logic to determine things like, oh, floating combat text. We're doing tags.shield, which means that it's going to be in blue, stuff like that. So that was one change I did. I don't think it was too big a deal when I did it. I know I made that one months, if not well over a year ago. So refactored ship class to use tags and not the ship class variable. I just talked about that. So I made it so ships are disabled rather than dying. So this is not really a feature yet, but it will be. So what I did is in my, there's so much stuff to clean up here. Like all this AI stuff, I think I'm going to move that into its own node, which I'll talk about that later. But so in my process, this is where we're kind of handling our logic for our ship. So you can see here, determine if we should be destroyed. To do, should allow a ship be, what did I was writing there? Should we allow a ship to be a derelict, still alive but inoperable? So I remember in Escape Velocity Nova, sometimes you would find, like you would teleport, you would like warp into a new system and there'd just be like a ship there. Maybe you were guided there by a distress beacon, or maybe you just found it floating there. And you had the option of basically boarding it and checking it out. And I thought that was awesome. But you could never really do that for ships that you fought. At least I don't remember being able to do that. So I thought that'd be kind of cool. So now I basically program this like, hey, if my HP is below or equal to 0, I added this. It used to be just like, yeah, we're dead. And then I would queue free, which basically deletes the instance. And then I would just return to stop further execution from all this code that's below it. But I added this like, are we dead for realsies check? Which just says, hey, if my HP is less than or equal to basically half of my maximum hit points, multiply by -1 to make it negative. So if my ship has, 200 HP, like maximum, if my HP is below 0, I'm not quite dead yet. But if it's below my max divided by 2, which is 100, times -1, which is -100, if my HP gets below -100, then I'm dead for real. Otherwise, I'm not quite dead yet. We should be disabled. So then I'm appending the tags disabled, which I'm not really using yet, but it's there. And I'm gradually slowing down the ship so that it's not just drifting in space forever, which could be kind of funny, but then you'll never be able to catch it and loot it, which is kind of lame. So I have it slowly just sort of drift to a stop, kind of like you're decelerating. And then I'm just ensuring that the new speed's not negative. I'm normalizing the velocity. I'm using a lot of the same code that I had earlier to where when I'm translating it, when I'm actually moving the ship from frame to frame. And then so here I'm translating it. I'm actually moving it on the thing. We're doing the calculated velocity. We're multiplying it by delta, which is the time elapsed between the different frames, because we are in this process event, which is called every frame. Delta is the elapsed time since the previous frame. Look at that. Awesome. So, and then we're just returning. So we're stopping execution, further execution of this, this method here. So all this other stuff here doesn't get called if we are below 0 hit points. So that's all I did. That was it. That's the whole change. That's the extent of what I've done so far, but there's much more stuff to go into that later. So for example, when I'm working through my AI stuff, so for example, like AI attack, we're simply just checking to see if we still have a target. So the target doesn't stop existing until it's actually destroyed. So what might end up happening is, off the top of my head, I might have to just go and when the ship gets destroyed, like create another ship that's like a wreck that has the same sprite, it has the same like weapon slots and everything on there, but it's a different node and it's a whole different instance ID, and it's not the same as this target, so that would automatically clear it. Or I could like fire a signal that like has the attackers, like, I don't know, there's a bunch of different ways that I can handle it. I just haven't done it yet. So that's all I've done so far. Made it so ships are disabled rather than dying, which effectively doesn't really do anything. It just means that ships beat on you longer for right now. But I have plans to do a lot more cool stuff with it later. And then this last thing is, I did this. So I can remove that thing here. So I added floating combat text because I wanted to LOL. So that's a good thing. And the combat text, how I did that is I created, and I just kind of threw it into other scenes, which is getting kind of bloated, but I made this floating combat text node, which is a node 2D. And then I also added a tween, a timer, and a label to it. So the label is actually just displays what the actual damage is. Then I attached a script to it, and the floating combat text script isn't too big a deal. There's some things here that I'm not really even using anymore. But so the amount, that's just the amount of damage that is to be displayed. And then we have the amount type, which I use tags here. So if it's damage, it will be showing up as yellow. If it's repair, I believe that shows up as green, a lime green. And if it's damage to a shield, that's blue. So right now everything is just damage basically, right? That's what it's defaulted to. But you can set this when you create a floating combat text. You can determine what the amount type is. And I'm already kind of doing some stuff later on here with how it works. I also have a variable to determine whether or not it's a crit, because I imagine crits are going to be bigger numbers, but I was working under the assumption that every hit would have its own floating number, but you saw earlier in the demo that that was really messy and kind of not what I'm going to go for now. Because, you know, in a big old firefight, there's just tons of numbers and you can't even see what the hell's going on. I like the idea of having that one consolidated number that just keeps updating. I don't know how I would handle it if it's a crit. So, and I also still need to figure out how I want to do the styling of it, like having it keep popping up as it's like updating. I think for crits, maybe it just gets really big and then it kind of goes down to a normal size. I might rig that up, but for now, this variable's unused, but it's still there. And then the target is basically so I can reference it, so I can have the number follow the ships. Because in these fights, especially with some of these fighters that are just going around, if you have a ship that's going like super fast and you get hit and a number pops up like over here and the ship keeps going, you have no idea. You just see a random number floating in space. It doesn't match it. So now when the number pops up, it follows the ship like as it's going. So I reference that with the target, so that's who we're going to be following. And there's some other variables here that don't have to be set, but we still need. So we have the duration, which is how long it should last. We have the spread, which is basically the angle in radians. So right now I have it like going up in a spread, so that way they're not stacking on top of each other. I just threw that in there just for funsies. I still might tweak that. I have the travel, which is going to be the ending position. So it's basically going to be a vector 2. I have it set to be -500, and then I'm basically, so a vector 2 has the x and y values. Remember, a vector is an arrow representing both direction and magnitude. Oh yeah, oh yeah. And so x is going to be 0, so it's right here. And then -500, when you subtract from a y value, it actually goes up, because in game development, it might be in other stuff as well, but think of like a piece of paper. Like if you're going to write on a piece of paper, not all cultures, but the ones I'm familiar with, start at the top left and they write from left to right. So the same kind of logic flows to game development. So when you're plotting out something on a grid, you start at the top left, and then you kind of work your way. So increasing x will go over to the left, and then increasing y will go down. Well, if you decrease y, it goes up. So here, like my desired ending position is basically like 500 pixels up, and that's just some arbitrary number that I just came up with. I already have some ideas on how to tweak that and refine it, Because I notice on bigger ships, that seems okay. But smaller ships like fighters, you just have like a number out in the middle of frickin' nowhere and it looks weird. So I might tweak that to be a variant of like, I don't know, half of the sprite size or whatnot. I can tweak that later. But I want the ending position to be up above the ship no matter where it's actually at. And this vector is relative to wherever their current position is. So I've got that, and I have the spread, which is used to basically rotate it like left or right, just a little bit. So that way they're not stacked on top of each other. And maybe I could even randomize the ending height of it a little bit as well to provide a little bit more variance, but we'll see. So then we have this start function, and you can see I have a comment here that says normally we throw stuff like this in the ready method, but position variables might not be set yet. So I think when I was working on this, I was running into a problem to where some of these variables weren't set when ready was called and it was acting strangely. So I made it so that it has a start method that the calling instance, whoever is creating this floating combat text, can call when they're ready for it to start doing its thing. And you'll see that when I look at the ship code with my take damage function, you'll see how I have that rigged up. So inside this, we are updating our label to have the rounded amount. Floats look messy. So if I didn't round this, especially for like beam weapons, it would show that I'm doing like 0.000002 damage or something, right? Depending on how many frames have elapsed, because the beam weapons do 15 or 12 or 15 damage per second. So every frame, if I'm running at like 240 frames a second, it's gonna be like, this is just a fraction of that. So it looks stupid. So I just round it. So we're setting our label text. So we're just getting our label dynamically here. We're just referencing it. Hey, label, boom. Update its text property to, we're converting the amount, which is rounded. So it's a float. We're converting it to a string or a string of characters or text. That's all we're doing there. Then we're determining the color, and how I'm doing that is I'm doing the modulate property, and I'm just setting it to equal these colors with which I used a hex code. I think I just Googled, because I don't know if you guys know this or not, but your boy is slightly colorblind, and I'm not great at like color pickers. So sometimes I just Google colors and I just grab hex codes and then I just throw them in here. So yay, fun. And so then we're calculating the spread so numbers don't stack on each other. So we're just basically setting that, we're determining our rotation by randomizing a range between the spread and then the negative spread. So what you're doing is like, hey, I want you to rotate it by like 3 degrees this way or negative 3 degrees, which is the other way. So you have like a 6 degree kind of span, right? Whatever the spread is, which in this case it is 0.3 radians, which I don't know off the top of my head what that is in degrees, but that's what I just picked. So we have a 0.6 radian spread is what it is. It goes to the, just basically it's like a cone effect. That's all it is. Rotate our travel vector by that amount. So that travel vector that we declared up here, we're just basically rotating it by that adjustment. And then now we are setting that to be, yeah, we're doing that. And then here was where I was doing some stuff with tweens. I had to comment this section out, which was determining the modulation, because I wanted it to fade out, but I haven't found a clean way to manage that, to like cleanly reset the tween without also resetting the position, which looked odd yet. So I'm going to hash that out later. But I have a tween node, and I'm interpolating the property of relative position, which is this variable I named here. And basically we're wanting, because the relative position starts at 0, 0. So the relative position is right at the normal position. And then as that tween goes, the travel, it's going to mimic this travel. So it's going to slowly interpolate that y value from 0 to negative 500 over a span of the duration that I set, which I think is 2 seconds. So here you can see we are interpolating that property, relative position. So our starting is vector 2, and then we are our final desired result is the travel, which is the 0, negative 500 vector 2, over the duration, which we defined of 2 seconds. And then we're doing the, I forgot what trans means. It's not transmission. It's basically like, so these things with tweens, there's a cool diagram I found somewhere. I can't pull it up right now, but it kind of shows how this stuff works. It just kind of shows like how whether it ramps up super quick or whether it starts super fast and it kind of slows down, or I was just playing around with this stuff. I might change these, who knows. And then this one I was also implementing the modulate. I talked about that. I have it commented out for now. I'm also handling it if it's a crit, which I'm basically just making it bigger, but nothing is critting right now, so I haven't even tested this. And then I'm starting the tween, and I'm starting the timer as well. And the timer I added on later. So the timer, if we look at that, I have it set, the wait time is set to 2 seconds, which is the duration. I could actually specify duration here to just restart it, but I just left it normally at 2 seconds here. And then I'm connecting a timer, or I'm connecting the signal for when the timer completes. So when it emits that timeout signal, I'm connecting that to this instance, and I'm connecting it to its complete method, which is farther down here. And this is just basically destroying itself and emitting a signal that it was destroyed. So that's what it does when it starts. Setting a label, setting the color, tweaking the rotation, having the tween start so I can start moving it. And then in my process function, which again is called every frame, I am making sure that our target is valid. So if our ship blows up, I don't want to crash the game by trying to reference something that doesn't exist. So that's why we're doing that if instance valid. Target, which is the target ship that we're supposed to be following. And I'm basically setting our global position to be the target global position plus our relative position, which is being tweened every frame by our tween. And then I also have an update amount because some weapons, like beams, keep dealing damage continuously. So this, originally I conceived it as you saw in the demo, to where every hit would trigger its own floating combat text instance. With beams, it was awful because they hit every frame, and they kept creating its own floating combat text. And since it's rounded, it just spammed a bunch of zeros everywhere. It made it look like you weren't doing any damage. So this is my solution to that. I have an update amount. And basically what this does is, I really should rename this to add amount, because it's not replacing the amount. What we're doing is we're just saying, hey, take this additional amount and just add it on to the amount of damage that we have. So if a floating combat text already exists and it says 5, if something else hits it and it does another 5 damage, I want to add that to the existing amount. So now the floating combat text is going to update the label to say 10. And then we're also restarting the timer to have that duration, so it keeps refreshing itself. So every time you keep hitting it, that floating combat text will stay in place. So that's how the floating combat text works. Let's see how we're doing it in the ship. So in the ship, this is all handled in the take damage. So I had to modify my take damage method to include this damage ID parameter. which is an int. And so let's take a look at a beam. So when I'm dealing, I can get rid of this debug line here actually. When I'm dealing damage, I'm calling the owner's take damage function, and I'm doing get instance ID, which is the instance of the thing that was dealing the damage, whether it's a projectile or a beam. The reason I chose this is because initially I wanted the projectiles to each create their own floating combat text instance, and I wanted beams to keep updating the same one. So I figured the beam is going to last a while. We can just get instance ID of that beam, and anytime it would call their take damage function, we can pass in the ID of that beam. So in that take damage function, we're now taking that, and then I basically made this floating combat text method here. And if we take a look at that, it's taking in the amount, which is just basically what's going to appear on the floating combat text. The amount type, again, it's using tags. So it's going to be damage, shield, or I think repair if you're healing it. It's going to be the damage ID, which we just talked about, determines whether or not we need to make a new one or not. And then whether or not it's a crit, which I'm not currently handling right now because nothing is really critting. So in this logic here, it started out with just basically just this stuff here. So just this stuff here. So I'm creating an instance of floating combat text, which is of type node 2D. Here I'm loading it in on the fly, and I'm instancing it right there. I'm setting the variables, so the amount of the floating combat text we're passing in from these parameters. I'm just setting those in there. For the target, I'm setting it to be this ship. This ship that's taking the damage, that's where the floating combat text needs to follow. So I'm setting it there. I'm also adding it to the scene, but not as a child of this ship, which you might think it should do. But the problem is when you do that, if your ship blows up or dies, the floating combat text instantly goes away. And that was very jarring and looked weird. I wanted the floating combat text to persist after a ship blows up or dies or is destroyed or whatever. So this way, I'm getting the scene tree, I'm calling the root node, and I'm just getting the main node, which is handling everything, which is probably not the best way of doing it. And I'm just adding it directly to my main scene as its own thing. That way, it's not dependent on anyone else's movement. It doesn't depend on any other instance existing. The main node's always going to be there. So, and that works fine. And so that way, yeah. So I did that. And then I'm also, once it's added to the scene, then I'm setting the position. Because I tried setting the position before it was added to the scene, and it didn't work. Because I assume that when you set the position, it's just going to get overwritten once it's added to the scene, because it's going to set its position to be that of its parent. So that's why in the floating combat text, there's no ready function. It's just a start method that I made. So here we're setting that global position to be the same as where we currently are. And then we are calling that start method to tell the floating combat text, hey, do your thing, float and display the combat text, right? And then all this other stuff I added later. So once I got it working, it was like, I need a way to handle beams. So then I added that damage ID, which I had to modify the take damage to add that damage ID. And everywhere that called take damage, like beam and projectile, I had to add that argument in there, which is fine. And then I just did this logic here that just basically says, hey, do we need to update an existing floating combat text, like if we're a beam weapon, or in case if I just want it to always do that. So here I have this variable on the ship, which I don't know if I want to keep. Where is it? Right here. Called current FCTs, or current floating combat texts. And this, I'm just using a dictionary. Initially, I started with an array, but I was like, dictionary is probably cleaner because I can just set the damage ID to be the key. So that way I can easily check, hey, does this dictionary have this key, this damage ID? So that's what we're doing there. We're just checking, hey, does our current FCTs, does our current floating combat text, does it have, and I'm converting it to a string, does it have this damage ID? If we do, it looks like we have one. Is the instance still valid? Because there can be a period of time to where a floating combat text might have actually gone away, but this is still tracking it in its list of current floating combat texts. So just to be safe and not crash my game, I'm checking if it's still valid. And I'm just referencing that. I'm converting that damage ID to a string again, all that stuff. And we're updating we're going to update the existing one. So if we do have it, I'm referencing it again. I'm calling its update amount method to just add this new amount to it. That's all I'm doing. And I'm setting this create new flag here, which is the Boolean. I'm setting that to be false. Because once I get down here, I say, hey, do we need to create a new one? If we don't, then just return now. And I guess I could just do that here. I probably don't even need all this crap, actually. Here, check this out. I'm going to refactor on the fly. I don't know what I was thinking with this. So we're going to do return. We're going to get rid of this. And there you go. So if it has the damage ID, but it's not valid, it's still going to come here and create it. So look at that. We just saved a few lines of code and simplified our stuff. Code review, baby. Woo! So cool. So we have that handled. And then the only other change after that is I'm adding it to our list of the currently tracked field floating combat texts. And then I'm also connecting that signal so that when it gets destroyed, I know that I can remove it from my list of floating combat text that I'm tracking. That's all it is. And I just have this connector function that just basically just erases that from that dictionary. I don't know why I put to do here. That's to done, baby. We'll just, that doesn't need a comment. You can clearly see what I'm doing. Remove deleted FCT from the list. I don't need to add a comment for that. That's already there. So cool. But yeah, that's what that was doing. So that's all I did. So I am so glad that I put comments in my code, even comments that are probably not really needed. Like, oh, W, acceleration. Well, you can clearly see actions accelerate equals input dot is action pressed ship accelerate. Okay, cool. If I ever change my inputs, then these are no longer valid. These are probably not good comments, but they help easily. I can just, now my brain is trained to just kind of ignore the code and just look at the comment stuff. So in this IDE, it is gray text. So I'm just scanning all the gray text to see kind of what I'm looking for. Like if I'm working in VS Code, I'm looking for the green comments. Same thing in Game Maker Studio 2 or whatever. I'm in PowerShell or SQL, like whatever I'm working in. Comments, I just kind of ignore the code. I look for the comment about what I was trying to do, and I look at that code block. Also, kind of a fun thing, if you ever worked with something like AI, like Copilot before it became like the big old Microsoft Copilot thing, when it was GitHub Copilot and you could run it in your development environment, you start typing in a comment about what you're thinking and it just helps you. So I was like, oh, this is actually, I didn't even have to change the way that I really worked when I was using AI. It could just boom, pop things in. I only used AI for a few months and then I realized it was kind of robbing the joy out of programming things, because I wasn't programming things. I was just explaining it what I wanted it to do. And I spent all my time just doing code reviews, which can be pretty tedious. It's one thing to get a problem and figure out a solution and write code, and that feels good. just typing in a comment and then watching it spew out a solution for you and then kind of reading through to make sure it's not having any shattering vulnerabilities or crashes or panics or whatever is not exactly fun. And plus I was becoming super reliant on it, which I didn't like. So I stopped it, which I guess I'm not one of those 10x engineers that everybody wants, but hey, I can be if needed. Anyway, that's about it. That's what I've done. And this is, I think, episode 61. 61! So, yeah. So where am I going to go from here? So some things that I am really perturbed with are how I made the ship. And if we go to one of these ship scenes, so if we go to my ships, let's take a look at, I don't know, Syntocracy Shuttle, right? So if you look over here and all this stuff over here, so we have our ship, we have ship thrusters. So I took out all the ship thruster code and made it into its own node. So that's all handled there. Ship weapons, I abstracted all that out of the ship stuff and made it into its own node. Then we have sprites, we have area 2D, collision polygons, and we also have light occluders. And all those are basically tied to the sprite. So what I think I might do is I might abstract all of that out into its own node. Because what I want to do is that eventually when I make like the in-game ship editor, if you were like to import your own sprite, you also need to be able to have it dynamically calculate the area 2D collision masks as well as the light occluders. And I know that there's a programmatic way of doing that. I just got to spend some time to figure it out. So I might condense all of that into its own node and then just boom, populate later. And then my custom sprite node can have a thing where you can basically set what the sprite is, and that will, update the sprite, and then it will recalculate the collision masks and the light occlusion masks. And then you could position where you want it, where you want the ship to be, the sprite to be for your ship, because some sprites might not be symmetrical. So where do you want the origin of that to be? Where's your basic point? Where does it rotate on? That kind of stuff. So that's what I'm going to do eventually. I'm going to put all that into one thing. I already have ship shields into its own thing. So then if we look at what I currently have in this script now, I still have 1,400 lines of code almost of stuff. And guess what? Almost, I would say half, if not more of that, is all AI logic. So if we go down here to AI control, that starts on line 737. And everything down is all AI state control. And on top of that, there's all these variables for the different AI stuff. So all those variables would go with it. I want to eventually move that into a AI control node. And my logic for that is, if we go down here to my process event, we're basically determining like, hey, are we a player? If we're a player, we're going to be doing the get player input, which is just, it's not doing any logic to determine what needs to happen. You as the player are doing that. It's just getting inputs, and the ship reacts to those inputs. Well, why can't the AI just return those same inputs? So that's what I want to do long term. I want to refactor all that AI into it to where if you look like up here, I have these actions that are determined, which basically correspond to the actual, they don't really correspond to it. They just basically denote whether or not this action is true or false. So rotate left. If it's true, you're gonna rotate left. You're gonna act like you're pressing the A button, or you're rotating the ship, or whatever it is, right? So I think the AI should be able to do its logic and just return the inputs that the ship needs to do. I think that's a much better way of doing it, because right now the AI stuff is sort of directly manipulating the ship, when I already have code that does that for the player with controls. Like, hey, if I press this button, do this thing. If the AI wants to do something, it needs to just say, hey, accelerate, go, turn, attack, whatever, right? So I already have all those mapped for players. So I think the AI should use that same stuff. And that would cut out literally half or more of this code. It would cut out more. It would cut out probably 2/3 of this code in this bloated ship script. And it would abstract everything out into an AI node. And I would know that, and it would be much easier to like, hey, is this a player ship? Okay, then just don't do AI, right? And also, long term, if I ever wanted to convert the game into multiplayer, it'd be much easier to handle that, I think, if everything was just done through a set of ship controls, right? So that's what I'm kind of looking at. I don't really want to refactor it right now because I kind of want to start working on some other features. So I think I need to do that before I make my ship editor. And also, I had that secondary star system mapper tool. I think I made that a separate program. Why not just build this into the damn game? Like, if you ever played something like Age of Empires 2 or Age of Empires with like their built-in scenario editor where you can just make like actual scenarios and stuff, that was cool as shit. Or if you played some of the older Elder Scrolls game, like back in the day when I was a kid, and I played Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind for the first time, and I discovered the TES construction set, where it was like, oh, this is kind of like how they built the world and stuff. So that was super cool. I remember I made this island that had a bunch of Nord guards, and it was awesome. And there was a boat that you could take out there, and it was just it's just basically a teleport. You just talk to the guy, you pay money, he takes you out there. Next thing you know, you're there. But I made like this upside down boat, and then there was a Nord that was standing on it, and I named him Captain Wet Shoes. And when you talk to him, it gives you the option of traveling to this island that I made, which was like this really big castle place with like a ton of skeletons that just kept spawning all the time. And you could help the Nord guards. That was fun. What if I apply that same stuff here to where, you could make your own star systems and stuff. So think of what that could do for mods. If I make everything exported as JSON and I define things in a standardized way, it'd be really easy to mod the game. Which if I was making a multiplayer game, that might be concerning because you don't want it to be client authoritative. I don't want to use anti-cheat, but the initial scope of this project was made to be a single player game. So I have no aspirations of multiplayer right now. I'm sure as hell not going to do a live service game. I don't want to pay for that stuff. And I don't think anybody wants that anyway. But I think long term, maybe a thing that could be added on later, a nice feature, is it'd be kind of cool to play co-op with like your friends. And like, hey, I have a ship, you have a ship, I'm currently in this star system, I'm going to travel over to yours. And it's like, you could do quests and stuff together. You could fight each other if you want to. You could do just crazy stuff. I think that'd be cool. But that is way out of scope for right now. I think my immediate stuff I'm going to start working on when I can is, I need to save this, is I want to do that ship refactor. And I want to add in the stuff so I can use that to basically build the game easier. So right now I have a few star systems. I want more. I want to be able to edit all that stuff And there's lots of other things that I think I have bloated in this ship script that's going to make expanding the game more difficult. So I think I need to take care of this technical debt now before I can get to the more fun stuff. But anyway, and I haven't even talked about UI yet. That needs a whole redo for sure. So, but yeah, anyway, that's enough of me rambling. It's been over an hour already. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. And I'll see you in whatever video I make next.